Welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Life After High School, Plan for Your Transition from High School to Adult Life. A quick introduction of myself that will hopefully provide you with the information as to reasons that I am your presenter. I spent 35 years in public education, teaching first, second, and third graders in Hillsboro, Oregon. I then spent a year at the University of Oregon obtaining a master's degree in special education. From there, I moved to Tacoma, Washington, and have resided in Tacoma since 1980. Over the course of the next 38 years, I was a classroom teacher for students with special needs. I became a school psychologist, and I also earned an administrative credential and worked as a special ed administrator. That journey took me through education positions from the Tacoma School District to Bethel, to Pave, to University Place, and Sumner School Districts, and back around, ending my career as an assistant director of special ed in Tacoma, Washington. I retired from my full-time position in 2015. Along the way, post-school transition became a passion of mine, and in 2006, I started teaching a college class at St. Martin's University called Transition to Adulthood, where I instruct prospective special ed teachers how to write meaningful transition plans and how to provide young adults with their post-school transition services so they can become as self-determined as possible when they exit public school. As this slide is titled, Defining Transition and All That Means, that's what we'll be doing today. And as it continues on and says life is full of transitions, that's true. We ourselves have gone through many transitions in our adult life, starting with school, exiting school, uh, going to college, getting married, having children. Those are large transitions in our lives. But for students in high school, one of the more remarkable transitions occurs when they get ready to leave high school and go out into the world as young adults. When the student has a disability, it's especially helpful to plan ahead for that transition. In fact, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, requires it. The future is not something we enter, the future is something we create. And creating that future requires us to make choices and large decisions. And that all begins with a dream. It's important to remember that it starts with a dream. Young adults have dreams, things they want to do after they leave high school. And some of those are large dreams. And it's important for us as educators and parents not to pop that dream, but to try to gain information about what it is about that dream that they like, how it affects, deals with their interests, with their skills, their aptitudes, so that we can help them meet that goal of theirs, or try to find something that is close to that goal that they really want to do, that matches their interests, aptitudes, and skills. All transition activities are personally defined, especially for that student. Now, a lot of students have the same needs, but your child, your young adult, is going to have needs particular and special to him or her, which is why the student is the heart of planning for their transition out of high school and into adulthood. Post-secondary goals are part of what is transition, and they're developed for and by the student. And like I said earlier, they must take into account the student's interests, their preferences, their needs, and their strengths. So we need to remember that the first part of transition is to make sure we have age-appropriate transition assessment so we can look at all those strengths and interests and develop plan and services so they can best meet those needs when they leave school. So to make sure that this happens, the school must invite the student to the IEP, not only to attend, but also to be able to explain their disability, how it affects them, and over the course of the years in high school, be able to begin to lead their meetings and actually be the conductor of their IEP meeting the last year that they are in public school. And so the central focus is to prepare the student to plan who will attend his or her IEP meeting, lead their own IEP meeting, and then be a large part in implementing their own plan that has been determined by the individual education plan. So what do I want for the future? Our job first, like I said earlier, is to gather as much information as we can to help the young adult answer that question. And why is starting early important? Well, actually, there's a phrase that goes in transition. It's never too early to start transition. The law says that post-school transition plans must be written and begin with the implementation at 16 years of age. That really is very late in a young person's high school career, because by that time they are probably in their junior year. And the previous law said the age of starting transition was 14. But there is a clause in the special ed law, both federal and state, that says earlier if necessary. And the IEP team, made up of school personnel, parents, and the student, can determine at what age a transition plan is designed and implemented in their individual education plan. And like that phrase goes, the earlier, the better. In fact, it's important even for parents of elementary students to begin thinking about transition and applying some skills at home that would be helpful throughout their life, even before they get into high school, such as doing chores and completing them, following directions, being able to work with a teammate. Those can start very early in life, even before students get into school. So, like I say, the IP team has the power to determine when transition services start for a student with special needs. It is very step by step, and as it says, we will have better results if the plans are developed for what the youth needs to learn and what experiences and resources will assist them to prepare for adult life. What kind of support will I need? Well, that's part of the transitions services, and we need to be able to identify that so that when they leave school, they have a system of support in place. And the way we do that is to explore their interests, their preferences, their strengths, and their support needs. And they need practice. Young adults need practice making those decisions and accepting the responsibility for their own decisions. And those can start at home, continue at home, and start with the transition plan at school. We want them to be able to know their strengths, their weakness, preferences, etc., so they can communicate to their support group what they want and who they need to help them in support. It's important that a young adult feels comfortable communicating feels comfortable and has knowledge to be able to understand their disability and how it affects them. Because when they go out into the adult world at 18, they're considered emancipated and without guardianship or power of attorney from someone else, they are responsible to divulge their disability and how it affects them and request accommodations either in further schooling or in the workplace. And so it's very important that they know what it is, how it affects them, and how and be very comfortable with that information so they can request those services, adult services, and request accommodations in the workplace. And so one of the services that we offer in school is practicing requesting accommodations. At every 2 and 4 year college, university in the state of Washington, there's a disability coordinator. That disability coordinator helps young adults with special needs to get the appropriate accommodations that they will need in the schools. If a student qualifies for some adult other services, there are organizations like the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation that can help the young adults when they're applying for work to be able to express their needs and ask for accommodations. So the young person's voice is very important. So what kind of support can I provide? Meaning you as parents, we as teachers, and we as also volunteers at the Pave organization. What kind of support can we provide? Well, here are some of the supports that we can provide. We can help them to discover their interests, strengths, and visions for their future. And that's where it starts. What is it that you would like to do when you leave school? And what are your interests about that possible future? What strengths do you have to reach that future? And so all of this, really, it's important that we believe in that young person's ability and capacity to make their own decisions and support those decisions. So that's a big part of post-school transition, is giving them opportunities to practice developing skills to make their decisions and make them known and ask for supports. So for families and caregivers, we want you to know the needs that your young adult has, and then practice with them in the community. And we at school will be doing the same thing, offering a lot of practice. And it's important too to encourage your young adults to have new and different experiences that they may not have had, so they again become more comfortable reaching out on their own to try new things and ask new questions. Again, it's important to know when a young adult leaves school that they do know their disability and how it affects them, as I said before, to ask for accommodations. Because once they reach the age of 18, they are considered emancipated. And again, unless there's in place of power of attorney or guardianship, they make all the decisions for them. And so when they go to work a job, when they go out to go to further education and training, we as parents, we as teachers, are not allowed to divulge a person's disability. They have to be able to divulge that themselves because it's personally identifiable information. So again, I repeat myself in that it's important for them to know their disability, how it affects them, and how to make requests for accommodations. And it's our responsibility to place them in experiences and new experiences so they feel more comfortable doing exactly that. As I said earlier, by the age of 16, students are eligible for special education, must have transition services as part of their IEP. And I'll say it again, earlier, if necessary, is the clause in the law, and it's the IEP team's decision whether it starts earlier than 16. Personally, I would make that request that it does start before the age of 16, because that's almost too late to get in all the services necessary for a student to become as self-determined as possible before they leave high school. So this is a flow chart that tells us exactly what transition is. These are the major components of transition. We'll be going through these one step at a time. I'll be doing explanations for you and also giving you some examples. So the first large requirement for the school, the parents and the student, is to conduct an age-appropriate transition assessment. We are trying to determine in this assessment the needs of the student, the strengths of the student, their preferences, and their interests. The difference between preferences and interests are things they like to do, they want to do, they have an interest in doing, or might have an interest in doing. Preferences is how they want to access those interests, such as an example would be, do they like to work indoors or outdoors? Do they like to work in cold or heated areas? Those kinds of things. It's a preference as to where or how they want to exercise their interest. And as I said, we will be assessing these 4 areas. And the way we do that is to triangulate. We have surveys and ask questions to give you parents and the young adult an opportunity to express their needs, strengths, preferences, and interests. And then we have assessments to assess those 4 areas. And then we also place students in opportunities where we observe them exercising their needs, strengths, preferences, and interests. One example is to do a survey of what my dream job is. So teachers can do this either individually, it can be a class assignment, they could choose to do it out loud with everyone as a way for students in a class to get to know each other. And this is just part of it. I'm only going to be showing you half of or a portion of these examples. But as you can see, my dream job is close to where I live, has paid vacations, allows me to work mostly by myself. And this allows us to kind of give an overview of the student and what they would like to have as part of their dream job. Here's another example where they're reflecting on their interests. And they have to go back as high school students and think when they were younger, what did I like to do when I was little? And write the answer. And then what do I like to do now? And it provides a good opportunity for them to see where they've come from and where they're going. And that's important to help them reflect on their history. Most of us are introduced to employment first by our parents and our grandparents, and then friends' parents. And it isn't until older when they have an opportunity to actually have jobs that they get exposed to other jobs. that give them more insight into what the world of work is and different kinds of careers. And here's a way to help them look back at how they were thinking as younger students and how they think now. Here's an example where we can match the student's strengths, preferences, and interests with a specific occupation or job. So again, these are just the first two areas, but if this job or career we're looking at requires good use of hand-eye coordination, can I do that now? It fits the job, and then is it a match for me? Or in terms of physical conditions, uh, it requires the use of hazardous mechanical equipment. Can I do that? Can I use that equipment? It fits the job. If the answer is I can't, then maybe this particular working condition doesn't fit my strengths, interests, and aptitudes. And the term age appropriate is very important. There are students in our schools that are considered very mildly disabled, have a few special needs. And then there's some other students who have moderate needs. And then there are other students who have quite a number of needs. And some along the spectrum there of those three differences, students may have difficulty writing. Uh, and so here's some examples of age-appropriate assessment where they don't have to write or read. They can just look and compare the two pictures and say, I'd rather work in a clean place, or I'm okay where I can get dirty. I'd prefer to work inside or outside. But you notice the models are adult models. One more example. As you can see on the top, do you like to work with many people around you, few people, or alone? Are you okay with lifting? Or no, I don't want to do any lifting. One assessment that can be conducted in school is called the ASVAB. Yeah, and it tests verbal, math, science, technical, and spatial. The military uses this to determine where their recruits can be placed that does match their interests and strengths with their abilities and their capabilities. And so it really tests a lot of different types of things that include auto information, mechanical comprehension, assembling of objects, um, as well as the basic skills of reading, math, written language. And this assessment is generally conducted by the occupational therapist in the school buildings. And you as parents may want to find out more about that particular assessment because it really does help narrow down what skills the student has and helps the transition team look at possible careers and jobs that match those their abilities, their skills right now. And so that may be a request that you would make of the IEP team. Once we have gathered all that information, districts don't often have the same forms. They have different forms. This is a form that I tend to use and voluntarily give it to teachers that I work with if they want to use it. Like I say, districts might not have this particular form in their IEP that's electronic, but what this does is it enables us to take the information that we've gotten from the assessments, the interviews, and from the students and you, parents, and put them in these areas. what are their interpersonal strengths, their academic functional strengths, and their work if they've had any experiences in the community. Preferences, their interests, like I said, they're expressed, observed, and assessed. And then what are some needs in those areas that might hinder, not necessarily prevent, but provide some obstacles along the way? And how would we as parents and teachers address those obstacles that the student can either overcome them or get some accommodation so they can still perform the requirements, but need those different accommodations. And then if they've had any work experience in the school or in the community, we can get reports from their supervisors to see what kind of worker they are. This is an example of a filled out template. A young lady who's 15, and she qualifies as a specific learning disability. So meaning that she would qualify for special services in the area of reading, math, written language, either one of those, two of those, or all of those. And so through our age appropriate assessment, we've gathered this information, and looking at her needs, we can read down and see that she has some difficulty accepting criticism without resentment. That tells us that that's an area we need to work on. Drop down to the academic. The GORT 3 is an academic assessment. It tells what reading level she's at in decoding, what reading level she's at in comprehension, but she has some difficulty understanding written instructions and so forth. And then we look down into the strengths and we see that she has some really commendable strengths. She's a class leader. She has good verbal communication. She's polite and cheerful. Academically, she's has excellent motor coordination, and she can write complete thoughts. And she has had some experience in the work world, and has shown that she has above quality work. She does above quality work, and she has good task completion. And I won't go through all the rest of them, but this gives us a visual representation of the needs, the strengths, the preferences, and the interests in the work experience that Shayna has, so that we can begin to go to the next part of our transition services, which is to write measurable post-secondary goals. And this is post-secondary. These won't be yearly goals, annual goals on the IEP, but they will be goals for what she wants to do after she leaves school. And the things we assess there, education and training, or excuse me, the areas that we write measurable goals on and have to write measurable goals are in the areas of education, training, employment, and independent living if it is needed, if it's necessary. Not all students, young adults, will have the requirement for us to provide goals and services in the area of independent living. So we're going to write measurable goals, like we said, in those three areas, the last one as appropriate. So in terms of education and training, what options are there? Well, the first option we think about probably is for all of it, our students, is to go to a four-year college or university. That's the first option we look at. Then, if we determine that is not an appropriate option, maybe further education at a vocational college would be appropriate. And if that's not an option, possibly a trade school, possibly Job Corps, possibly an apprenticeship program, or maybe they can get their post-school training on the job and they learn as they're doing. An example of a post-secondary goal for a student going to college would be after graduation from high school, student name will enroll, will attend full-time at the University of Washington to earn a degree. We could even state to earn a degree in a certain area or in a certain subject area. One thing that is required in all goals is the terminology that it has to be after high school. It can state upon graduation from high school, after graduation, after completing high school, or just after high school. The student will do something. The word will is measurable, and that's also a word that's required in all post-secondary goals. Because we're going to, after the young adult leaves school, the school district has a requirement to follow up to see if they have actually met their post-school transition plans. And that is conducted a year after they leave school. And so we want to state that this goal will be after high school and that they will be doing something. The goal for a 2-year college or vocational school would be after graduation from high school, student will enroll in a 2-year college or vocational school at TCC, Tacoma Community College, or Bates Technical College, attend full-time to earn an associate's degree. Another one for apprenticeship. Again, after graduation from high school, student will obtain an apprenticeship to learn the skills necessary to become an electrician, a carpenter, a welder, any career job that they can want to go into and have an apprenticeship program. The next large area is employment. What type of job are we looking for, or career employment? And based upon our assessment, this particular student wants to become an electrician. So he will have some education goal, maybe an apprenticeship goal, but his post-secondary career goal in employment is, upon graduating from North High School, the student will get a full-time job as an electrician. Now, some special ed students will not be capable of working and obtaining a full-time job, but that's fine too. We still need to find out what they want to do in terms of employment and provide the services so they can reach that goal of employment, but maybe only work part-time. So this goal is to, upon graduation from high school, obtain a part-time 20-hour per week job as a supported work at a supported work vendor. And then if necessary, we need to provide services and write goals for independent living if the student needs them. And an example here would be after graduating from high school, the student will live independently with supports for budgeting and time management. So those are the skills that they still need support for after leaving high school. Another one could be, upon graduating from high school, the student will live with his or her parents for 2 years, then live independently. So it just gives that student a little longer to practice the skills necessary in the living setting so that they learn the daily living skills and can do those daily living skills more independently before they either get an apartment, have a house, live with roommates, or even in a group home. The next area we're going to work on is to identify the transition services necessary to exit out into education, employment, and learn the independent living skills. And we have 7 areas of transition services that we must address, or in the IEP state, not needed or not needed at this time. No skills in this area is needed. And we can write that right on the IEP. It's important for you as parents to know these 7 areas must be addressed and services provided, the necessary services provided, either at school, at home, in the workplace, practice, the practice job situation, or stated in the IEP, not needed. Those areas include instruction, related services, community experience, employment, adult living skills, daily living skills, and functional vocational assessment. So what do these activities include? There are quite a long list of activities and services that could be necessary. And not all of them have to be met in 1 year. They're met through the course of a student's life in high school. And that student can have a 4-year life, a 5-year life, a 6-year life. That student can remain in high school up to or through their 21st birthday. So as examples that I'm going to give you now, or we're looking at now, don't have to all be done in 1 year, but they may be the ones that are chosen to do the first year. And then as they're completed, new set of activities in the area of instruction will be listed on the IEP. So for this student going to college, one of the examples of a set of activities would be to visit campuses and meet the student support service person. Now, how would that be done? In many different ways. It could be a field trip that the school takes that includes all the students who want to go to a 4-year college or a 2-year college. It could be that the student is able to call and arrange for that visit by themselves and provide transportation over there to the university, or even conduct a phone interview. Or maybe it's agreed upon at the IEP team that you, as a parent, will take the student to visit the campus and meet the student support service. So there are lots of different creative ways that these services can be provided by all of us, the school, the parents, and the student. So the next one listed here is learn and practice self-advocacy. This is something, in my opinion, that starts at home by giving kids choices, but also is practiced at school so that we can actually sit down across from somebody and tell that person about their needs. And that can be the special ed teacher. It could be one of the administrators that has time. It could be arranged where some schools have volunteer business people who come in and provide practice interviews. And at that practice interview, this young adult could practice divulging his or her disability and what accommodations they might need on the job. Another important service, and can be taught during math class, is financial management and money skills, because we all need those, don't we? And the last one too, learn how time management works for you. And some things that can be done there as an instruction are to teach the student how to use a calendar, how to use an agenda, how to break down their work in like homework, how many minutes they need to spend on certain types of homework, and those kinds of examples. But they're taught at school, practiced at school and at home. Another area is called related services. And related services, some students are already getting related services if they qualify for speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, mobility training, vision therapy, hearing therapy. But in terms of transition, what we're trying to do here during the course of a student's tenure in school is also not just provide those related services, but begin to assess, will they continue to need those services, those related services, such as mobility training, after they leave school as an adult. And then it's important to know that once they leave school, those services, if are necessary, will be paid either by the student, by the parents, or through insurance, which is why we're looking ahead into the future. Will this young adult still need those type of services once they leave the public school setting? Another example of related services would be to sit down with the IEP team and develop a list of people that are going to be supportive, provide support for the young adult. What are their phone numbers, addresses, and what other community services like medical providers this student needs to have a list of and know the addresses, know how to contact those type of providers. And also looking into the future, after they leave school, if they qualify for some type of assistive technology equipment and are using it at school, will they continue to need that after post high school? And how will that service be provided and or the equipment provided? So this is a very important, as if it isn't a minor service that we need to address under this related services, because we're trying to determine if the young adult will still need this type of service once they leave, and how will it be provided. The next one, the third example, or the third area, is community experiences. And again, what we as educators will need to do is find out if a student can make and keep their own appointments. How do they use a calendar? Do they still use a calendar like I do, which is a paper pencil calendar? Are they capable of using an application on their phone? And how do they make and keep those appointments? Do they need to set reminders on their phone? Do they look at their calendar every day? And that's a skill that we as educators must provide and teach them how to do that. You as parents at home can then check up with your young adult to see how they're using either their calendar or their technology in this particular area about appointments. Another area for community experience would be, is your young adult going to use public transportation or obtain a driver's license? Another area, what about banking, budgeting, and shopping skills? Do they have those skills now? How are we going to teach those skills in the school setting? How are you going to practice them at home? And then, of course, registering to vote and learning how to vote is another example of community experience. Employment, the next large area of transition services. An example here would maybe just set up a meeting where the student goes out into a job and is able to meet with those adult workers and have questions asked and answered. Or we can reverse that and have some of those adult workers come into the school setting and be interviewed by the young adults. especially if more than one young adult wants to do a similar job or have a similar career. Also, if you are an adult worker, there are those days where you take your child to work. And I believe they still have those. But even if it's not an organized, I have all confidence that if this is an employment service that's in this your young adult's IEP, that they would be excused from school to go to work with you and have an opportunity with a list of questions to ask your coworkers about what's it like to work in this career. Another very appropriate opportunity is to have the young adults participate in job shadows. So if they've named an interest, then how can we have them follow along for a couple of hours, a half a day, or a full day, just watching and shadowing that person in that job, and even taking notes and asking questions while they're shadowing the person doing the job that they've expressed that they want to do. And multiple job shadows would be important early in the high school career to help them narrow down if they have several interests, say 3 interests. They could go on 3 different job shadows to help them get an idea. And maybe now, after having been out there and watching a person do the work that they thought they wanted to, they come back and say, no, that's not for me, but I liked what this guy or this lady did over here. And then along with that, we as educators would like to and must provide practice in how to fill out a job application and practice interviewing skills. And another service is to help them memorize their social security number. Adult living skills, these are some examples, may not be appropriate until later in the high school career. But we have to think about where our young adults are going to live and are they capable of living by themselves, what kind of support they need. And so these are just some examples of the types of skills that we will want listed on the transition plan as appropriate in order for them to be, again, independent and be able to conduct these or exhibit these skills in the community. So where are they going to live? Can they make application, and do we need to help them learn how to make an application for their living after they leave school? Are they going to rent? How do you find a rental? Do you want to live with roommates? Do you want to live by yourself? And then how do you address the application? Certainly important, we talked about earlier about money management. And do they know how to write a budget, pay the bills? These are skills that we can teach during math class. The other one here is I touched on at age 18. So really, what needs to happen is the school district needs to alert you during the IEP meeting of your young adult's 17th year. They must alert you 1 year before the IEP meeting of the 18th year of your son and daughter that unless there is some something in place, such as power of attorney or different types of guardianship, that young adult on their 18th birthday, unless these are in place, that you have either full guardianship, partial guardianship, or some other types of guardianship, they make all the decisions. And if they need help making those decisions, that's why you have to explore and get information about those types of guardianships. They could, if they have all their rights, they could refuse. One of the things they can do is refuse you even attending the IEP meeting. And so when they turn 17, It's very important that the school district notify you of that. And I believe most districts have a form that they give you, and on the IEP, there's a place that they have given you information that's checked off, or you initial it, something like that. And then there's a whole year before they turn 18 that gives you the time to explore these types of guardianships and other legal issues that need to be in place so that you are protected and the young adult is protected when we have to make decisions about what's happening after 18 in terms of transition. Another example would be to develop an informal network of supports like we talked about earlier, and even gather those people together and do and conduct what's called a person-centered plan. And that's pretty involved. And so what I'd like to do is, if you need more information about a person-centered plan and then need some help with that, that you contact the Pave organization and get information from them, because they have detailed information. And of course, we're always more than happy to help with any questions concerning all issues of transition. And then the last area of transition services are daily living, well, not the last area, the next to the last area are daily living skills. And daily living skills are uh, different than adult living skills. So let me go back just once here, and let's define adult living skills in comparison to daily living skills. I think you probably have an idea just by listening to those two words, adult and daily. Adult living skills are those things that are more of a 1 or 2 or 3 time occurrence. You open a bank account probably once, unless you move somewhere else. You set up guardianship once, although you may change that guardianship along the course of the way. But they aren't things that are done on a daily basis, such as these. If you or I, or the young student, is taking medications for some reason, that young adult needs to understand the directions for taking that. And that happens every day. And so they need to understand what it is they're taking it for, what's, how often did they take it, when did they take it, every day. And also, it's important that if necessary, that you have procedures in place at home in case of emergencies. That's something to be ready for daily also. And definitely the third example down there about personal needs, uh, preparing simple foods, maintaining a clean body, things like that. Those are daily living skills that students would need on a daily basis, and they become listed on the IEP under transition services and instruction provided at school and also followed up at home. And so there'd be 3 people listed on the IEP as providing those: school, parents, young adult, because they'd be practicing those skills most likely at home. The last area in services is to conduct, if necessary, a vocational assessment. And this is where possibly the ASVAB, ASVAB, ASVAB would come in to help evaluate areas. If a student says, I am planning, and we've been doing planning and instruction along the way, and I'm planning to go into this type of career, this type of job, that's where the occupational therapist can do some evaluation that is functional and related to that work, such as do assessment on how much a student can lift, how long they can sit before they need to get up, walk around, stretch, How long can they stand? How high would a work table need to be? Those type of functional needs within the work setting that a student can tolerate, or we can provide accommodations for. That would be part of the functional and vocational evaluation. There, and also be able to then produce observable work samples so we can see the speed that they work with, the quality of work they do. And then another area here is that it's important that you and or your young adult make an application to the vocational rehabilitation services, commonly referred to DVR. And it's important that the school district then invite the DVR counselor to come to an IEP meeting so they can discuss their services they provide, how to access those services, and then be a part of the assessment process to see if a young adult would qualify for those services after they leave school. So those are the 7 areas of transition services that need to be provided. Well, the next area is course of study. And the definition of course of study is just what it says here. There are listed the classes that a student takes in high school that provide the training for the student to reach their post-school goals in education training, employment, and daily living skills. And it's also not just the classes. Sometimes for those students with moderate to more severe disabilities, they won't necessarily list classes, but they will list types of classes, um, such as developmental program or something like that, where they're covering a lot of the services within a large class that isn't necessarily doesn't have a title from the district, such as History 1, Science 3, things like that. But they can include all the required elective, all the required classes, elective classes, advanced placement type classes, or, like I described, specially designed instruction that could include experiences in the community for those students who have larger and more intense educational needs. This is an example of a student, Maria, who's 16 years old, and she, after graduation, will successfully complete a medical assistant course at Walrus Community College. And she'll be employed after college as a medical assistant. Independent living, she has no needs at this time. So we're addressing the courses necessary or the type of instruction necessary she needs to be successful at Walrus Community College. Now you notice that her course of studies starts at the 10th grade on this IEP. That's because she's already finished the 9th grade, and we already know the classes that she took and was successful in by looking at her transcript. So we don't need to list those classes on this year's IEP. We need to list this year's classes and then project out, since she is going to graduate with her cohort as a 12th grader, project out what classes in 11th grade and 12th grade she will take. Now, if in the 11th grade there's a change, we just make the change on the current IEP. The 10th grade classes will be on a transcript. The 11th grade classes could stay the same or change, as well as the 12th grade classes. They could stay the same or change. After completing her 11th grade classes, those are no longer listed on the IEP. They're on the transcript, so we know that she's completed successfully those classes that were listed on last year's IEP. And now we're looking at the projected classes for 12th grade. And if they're the same, they stay the same. If not, we make changes. So in looking at her 12th grade classes, she's taking some required classes. She has a special ed class, and it's listed as Learning Support, SE, Special Ed, both semesters. And there she will be working on her transition skills and those type of things that she needs to be successful as she leaves high school. And then it looks as if she's in like a Head Start program, or at least an early learning program at Walrus Community College, where she spends the first half of her day at her high school, the second half already getting started on her occupational courses. So this is an example of a very mildly mild special needs student. Dino's in the 9th grade, and he has a learning disability in reading and written language. He's still rather mild or moderately disabled. He has an interest in mechanics, and he wants to work in his father's fishing boat after school. He will graduate with general ed requirements and credits. He has an interest that he plays percussion in the band. So he's a 9th grader, so we're listing his classes that he's currently taking in the 9th grade, and then projected out 11, 10, 11, 12. So we can see he's in English special ed because he qualifies for reading and written language. But then he has courses of required courses he has to take, and or wants to take elective courses like band, that still meet his graduation needs but prepare him to meet his post-school goal. He changes a little bit in grade 11 because he still has his special ed courses in reading and written language in his English class. He's taking his required history classes and then his elective band. But that's 11. Let's drop down to grade 10, okay? Grade 10 is pretty much the same type of classes as 9th grade. But in 11th grade, we can pick up where he is also spending half his day at the skills center getting training on becoming a diesel mechanic, because that's his post-school employment goal and education goal. And then he finishes up with his required courses and in his early learning in his diesel mechanics, so that he is quite prepared to go become a diesel mechanic right after he leaves school and graduates from high school. Here's an example of a student who has Down syndrome, and she attends what in some districts call a life skills class. But she's able to take some other classes outside of that life skills class. She's capable of being in, and these are listed as age. It could be age/grade, but in this school, it's listed as age. As you can see, she's going to stay in school up to or through her 21st birthday. So she's taking elective classes really in aerobics and fundamental art, but she needs communication skills and independent living skills, which will fill up the rest of her day in her life skills class. Second semester the same. Her 17th age classes are pretty much the same. She has an interest in art, so she stays there. She also, let me interject right here, if we go down to age 18, she's taking a jewelry design class there, and that actually she already makes beaded jewelry. Her post-school goal for employment could be self-employed. She can have her own business selling her jewelry at farmers markets, art fairs, things like that. So that gives you an idea that how, through the age-appropriate assessment, we found this interest and skill she had. provided her classes at school so that could be her goal of being an independently employed business person. So as we drop down to ages 19, 20, and 21, she gets into a program at Highland Community College. And they have, which is HCC, they have a wonderful program up there that for students with disabilities, where she could enter at age 19 and have these services provided there as independent living and transportation needs and job readiness skills, as well as taking a class in jewelry design and job shadowing. And it looks like every day she would be job shadowing. Pretty much the same her 20-year-old, but she goes out into a work experience now in a business, a jewelry store, with some support for half the day. And then at age 21, she's employed 20 hours a week. And then she spends 4 hours a week in the transition program at Highline Community College. So I hope that gives you a range of examples from students who have mild needs in transition to students who have much more intensive needs in transition. And then we also drop down and we have to write annual goals that, that coordinate with post-school goals. And these are goals that are written in areas of need that still will address how it supports the students' goals in further training, education, employment, and or daily living skills. So they are linked, or they're called annual IEP linked goals to the post-school goals. An example would be when presented with 5 items that Angela purchased for daily living, she will be able to estimate the next highest dollar to the total price needed to buy those items 80% of the time, 4 out of 5 times she goes to the store. You see, it's a daily living skill goal that's worked on daily, but it is tied to her post-school goal in her daily living area of post-school services. And the next example, during a simulated job interview, the community business person, with a community business person, Tanya will respond appropriately to 10 questions used in interviews with 100% accuracy on 3 out of 4 trials. So we have taught her in school the types of questions that she will be asked during an interview. We've provided practice on that with people she knows. Now we're going to bring in a volunteer from the community, someone she doesn't know, and that person, he or she, will be asking interview questions. Some of them maybe not, Tanya will not have heard, but we want her to use the training she's gotten in school on how to interview, not just the questions, but her presentation of body language, eye contact, those types of things, such that she can answer those 10 questions with 100% accuracy on 3 out of 4 times that a stranger comes in and practices interviewing with her. And you see how that ties into her post-school goal for employment. And so she'll be able to go out and interview or have somebody come in if there's like a job fair at school and interview by herself and be successful and have a job offer. Another one, it would be when presented with job applications and W-4 forms, Robert will complete the forms with 90% accuracy on 2 out of 3 trials. You might ask, well, if this is a job application or a W-4 form, and he's only 90% accurate, That's not going to help. But we need to start someplace, because this is just a practice activity, so that when he does the real form, we have practiced enough with him over the course of a semester, a year, that he can fill it out with no errors. So it's a progressive goal, annual goal, just like a math or a reading annual goal. The last area of transition is to coordinate with services that adult agencies provide. And what services are available in Washington State? They go by county. And so we live in Pierce County. I live in Pierce County. Some of you might be in Mason, Kitsap, or King County. They're at the presentation today. And so the main services that they provide, the main agencies that you might deal with are the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, short abbreviation DVR, and we can see what they provide. They can provide counseling services, who want to work, that are experiencing barriers because of these issues, physical, sensory, or mental disability. And that counselor works with each person to develop a customized plan that helps them reach their employment goal. Like we said earlier, this person can be a member of the IEP team as early as ninth grade if necessary, or at least they can be at the first IEP meeting and set up a meeting with you and your young adult to explain the services they can provide and when they can start providing them. And they will write this plan. And I don't want you to get confused between school and DVR. While in school, your young adult has an IEP, an individual education plan. If they are eligible to receive services from DVR, they, with the counselor and you, write an IPE. And that is an individual plan for employment. So don't get those two confused, please. IEP, school, IPE, DVR. And then there's the Developmental Disabilities Administration, and they work with students who are young adults who are have developmental disabilities, and you, their families, to obtain services and supports on an individual basis. And those supports generally are much more intensive because the needs are much more intensive for those students who qualify. I'm not going to go into the details of what those qualifications are. The best I can do for you is to find out where the nearest DDA office is and go by and pick up some information. But also, Pave may have some information on DVR and DVD at their office and could help with that also. And then there is a federal income supplement program through Social Security that your student may be qualified for. And we can see here it's mainly designed to help aged, blind, and disabled people who have little or no income. And that cash is meant to provide basic needs for this, the young adult listed here. Here's a general timeline that I want to provide. Eighth grade really is a good age to start if your IEP team can possibly work with the special ed teacher there in order to begin some assessments, maybe borrowed from the high school, that would help identify interests and learning styles, and even do some job exploration on the internet. There are web pages that they can go to, and you can go to, where there's short snippets, like 3-minute snippets of what does this person required to do in this job. so they can start exploring some of those little snippets and looking at what it is entailed in that job or profession to see if they would like to do that. And definitely, they should be starting to practice those self-advocacy skills, self-determination skills, and practicing those, again, starting with learning their disability and how it affects them. In grade 9, this is where we start the formal transition plan normally. But I said earlier, if necessary, if the team decides on it. But what I want to call to your attention here is, if we look at grade 8, the first thing on that arrow is identify and or assess their interests, their aptitudes. And look at grade 9. Again, that needs to be repeated in grade 9. And you might ask why. Well, over the course of that year, some of those experiences that the 8th grade student had maybe change their ideas about what they want to do in the world of work. And so the assessments used would be different. And we need that age-appropriate assessment to help plan the IEP transition plan. And this is where we start forming the course of study and actually listing the transition services that will be provided or taught at grade 9. As we go to grade 10, again, review the interests, continue to provide transition services, possibly make a decision about how the student will graduate either by a diploma or a substitute way through the IEP. Grade 11, again, review the interests, maybe give the same surveys to see if anything's changed, and have them look at those surveys, have a young adult at school look at those surveys to see if any changes have been made and why, in terms of what their interests, how their interests have changed. And as we go, we'll also review the graduation strategies or status, excuse me. And then in grade 12, here's where we're going to complete everything if they're going to graduate with their cohort, which their cohort means the year that they started high school. And some may continue on in that 18 to 21-year-old program, where they could be employed off campus, or some districts have what's called a community-based transition program for 18 to 21-year-olds, where they provide more specific job skills, both general job skills, completing work, management of time, those things, but also specific job skills. And they may even be out working at that time also. But we still need to make sure that we've assessed along the way so that when they are 18, we can begin to focus more directly on what continued instruction is needed for them to be employed and to live independently and obtain additional training if necessary. Now, you heard me speak about the cohort being the year they start high school. A lot of kids are in school from kindergarten through 12th grade, and they develop friendships, long-time friendships. And so there is, I want to alert you to this law about graduation called Kevin's Law. And you can see the RCW, which is the Washington State Code 28A 155 170, that allows any student who's been receiving special education to participate in the full graduation ceremonies with their peers. Not just the graduation ceremonies, but all senior activities that seniors go through in their 12th grade year. And the law requires that every high school is to adopt the policy, and students will possibly receive a certificate of attendance at that time, which isn't a diploma because they haven't graduated from school yet, but they're still in school. But they don't walk off the stage empty-handed. And then some will be receiving their diploma that they have completed everything that is required and that has been determined by the IEP team. So that's important for you to know, especially during that 12th grade year, that your young adult has the right to participate in these activities. Now, this not being a live presentation, we haven't had opportunities for you to ask questions during the presentation. And so what we're going to ask of you is to write your questions down and send them in. And then what we'll do is we'll answer all those questions together, because your question may be just important to somebody else, but they didn't think of it at the time. And then get those questions and answers back to you as soon as we can. So thank you for coming. Have a great the rest of your day, and congratulations to your young adult on progressing through high school with a well-written and appropriate transition plan based upon their specific needs. Thank you.